Probably the most important aspect to this project is that it sits on watershed land and that it's just a stone's throw from Lake Chamberlain, 1,600 feet from Lake Chamberlain, which is one of New Haven's water supply reservoirs. That may sound very scenic to have your housing project very close to the reservoir, but that housing project calls for 35 houses on 33 acres of ground, and that represents a 300% increase in the allowable density. Now, Bethany has had 3-acre zoning on its watershed land for around 40 years, and that zoning has really stood the test of time. The aquifer has been preserved. There have been no cases of pollution of the aquifer or of wells going bad because of overdrawing on the aquifer. A 300% increase in the zoning is really going to test that. And the problem is there's no way to know how much water there actually is in an aquifer. And there's no way to find out that a sewage system has failed until it has failed. And then it is way too late. In order to supply water for 35 homes, 1 or more mega wells are going to have to be drilled. There's no way to tell how much water there is in the aquifer. But when you start drawing for 35 houses in a place that should have just 11, you are looking for trouble. The chances are very good that the aquifer will be unable to supply that kind of water, and it will impact negatively the wells of surrounding homes that have been there for as long as 40 years. While impacting the wells is a serious issue, polluting the wells is a much, much more serious issue. If the groundwater is polluted, as happened in Brookfield, Connecticut after they approved a similar project, the courts will make the town responsible for that. That's exactly what happened in Brookfield. And it will result in a serious tax burden being imposed upon all of the citizens of Bethany. Now, can you give me one good reason why the town of Bethany should shoulder a risk and a responsibility like that for a private developer? People are sometimes quick to say that if you have an increase in population in town, that it spreads out the tax burden on everyone and will result in lower taxes. In every instance that I'm aware of, exactly the opposite is true. Let's start at the very beginning. If you have a road that goes past a field, yes, that road has to be plowed and that road has to be maintained. But the flowers in that field don't require that their trash be picked up, and the cows in that field don't have to be educated. As the population increases, it places a pretty serious burden on the infrastructure. The most serious burden is on education. It costs about $15,000 per child to educate a child properly. With more people comes more traffic. With more traffic comes more accidents, comes more traffic surveys, comes traffic lights, and they cost $125,000 at the minimum a piece. All of these things are taxing the infrastructure and taxing the expenses on the townspeople. With more people coming into town, not only is there more traffic, but there's more accidents, there are more house fires, there are more medical emergencies. And while these are being handled presently in Bethany on a volunteer basis, we have 2 resident state troopers and we have a volunteer fire department. What will happen will be, with an increased number of people, volunteers will not be able to keep up with that. And if you think about this, it's not just the volunteers that are at issue. there's also the equipment for those volunteers. And for instance, if Bethany had to buy an ambulance, that is probably $125,000 or more. So yeah, you've got a volunteer who's running the ambulance, but you've still got the expense of the ambulance itself and all the ancillary equipment that's involved with that. You might think that how could a project like Green Haven produce a substantial change in town? Well, the average population census shows that there's about 2.6 people per household. So you're talking about an increase of about 100 people for those 35 homes. But the problem is that Green Haven is just the tip of the iceberg. The way the zoning change has been written, that increase in density would apply not only to the 33 acres at the corner of Myers Road and Old Amity Road, but to 45 other pieces of property in town. Now, if those 45 pieces are grow at the same rate or allow the same population density as the Green Haven proposal, you are looking at about 6,900 additional people in town. That's not quite quadrupling Bethany's present population. That's a significant increase. This brings us back to Bethany's guiding principle number 1, which is found in the first few pages of Bethany's Town Plan of Conservation and Development. And that first guiding principle says that Bethany's rural character should be maintained, and that it was achieved over a long period of time, and that it needs to be preserved for the future, for our future generations. An overwhelming number of Bethany citizens believe that the leadership in town should maintain the rural character of Bethany and should implement the town plan just as it's written without any changes. Now, I urge you to go to www.ruralbethany.org. There you can find 2 petitions that you can sign opposing this zoning change. You'll also find up-to-the-minute news and notices of any upcoming events. I also strongly urge you to come to the public hearing regarding the zoning change, and that is scheduled for the evening of April the 3rd, 7 o'clock at Town Hall, probably to be held in the gym. Thank you.